Project 1134B. Berkut B entered service in 1971. It was an 8,200-ton standard beast, packing 120,000 horsepower. 4 massive gas turbines pushed this steel giant to 32 knots. Turns out, the Soviets built it for one specific job: hunting NATO submarines. Its decks were stuffed with 80 surface-to-air missiles and twin heavy torpedo tubes. Officially, the Soviet Navy didn't even call it a cruiser, classifying it instead as a large anti-submarine ship. It operated as a floating fortress, yet it always sat in the shadow of the massive nuclear-powered Kirov cruisers. But that extreme specialization became its fatal flaw. For all its size and 173-meter length, its primary weapon was the metal system, meaning it lacked a dedicated heavy anti-ship punch. On top of that, running 4 complex gas turbines drained the naval budget fast. By 2020, the last one was officially sent to the scrapyard. The fleet needed something much smaller, but with a punch that could obliterate capital ships, forcing engineers to completely break the laws of traditional shipbuilding. Project 1239. Steregushchiy entered service in 1989. It is a 1,050-ton catamaran hovercraft. 2 gas turbines and 2 diesels push it to a top speed of 55 knots. The engineering trick is the air cushion. It lifts the hull out of the water, allowing it to carry 8 heavy Mosquet anti-ship missiles. When resting, it floats like a standard catamaran, but under pressure, a flexible skirt traps air to literally lift the massive steel hull. It was built to sprint, strike, and vanish before radar locked on. But that speed came with severe penalties. The aluminum hull was highly vulnerable, and the complex propulsion system was a maintenance nightmare. Production halted at just 2 ships. The Navy realized they needed a cheaper, conventional platform that still packed a heavy punch, pointing directly to a ruthless 660-ton killer. Project 1234 OVOD entered service in 1970. It was a 660-ton package generating 30,000 horsepower. 3 diesel engines gave it a top speed of 35 knots. The thing is, engineers crammed 6 heavy 3,180-kilogram Malachite anti-ship missiles into a 60-meter hull. That is cruiser-killing firepower bolted onto a coastal boat. 6 missiles, 660 tons. It fundamentally changed naval math. But strapping 18 tons of top-heavy weaponry to a small frame ruined its stability. It rolled violently in rough seas. On top of that, its short-range air defense was limited and not enough against serious air attack. Sacrificing armor and stability for heavy weapons wasn't a new mistake. Decades earlier, Soviet shipbuilders faced the exact same problem when they pushed out a completely unarmored 2,400-ton workhorse that fought through World War II. Project 7 hit the water in 1938. It was a 2,400-ton fleet destroyer. 2 steam turbines pushed 48,000 horsepower, giving it a top speed of 38 knots. Built fast and cheap, they became the backbone of the Soviet wartime fleet. They escorted convoys and provided heavy artillery support with 4 130mm guns. 29 ships built, constant combat. They absorbed massive damage in the Black and Baltic Seas. But their design was fundamentally compromised. The design suffered from structural weakness and limited seaworthiness. Serious underwater explosions or heavy battle damage could be catastrophic because of the weak hull structure. Losing nearly half the fleet forced a post-war rethink. The Navy demanded destroyers that wouldn't crack under pressure. They needed something faster, tougher, and powered by a completely untested type of engine. Project 61 entered service in 1962. It was a 4,300-ton warship packing 72,000 horsepower. 4 gas turbines propelled it to 35 knots. The engineering was radical. It became the first class of major warships in the world powered solely by gas turbines. The Kashin class was also the very first Soviet ship to feature a dedicated helicopter pad, though it lacked a hangar to store one. NATO crews called them the singing frigates because the high-pitched turbine whine carried for miles. Zero steam, pure acceleration. They hunted submarines with strict precision. But those revolutionary turbines had a heavy cost. They burned through fuel at an alarming rate, severely restricting the ship's operational range. Plus, the initial design lacked any anti-ship missiles. Relying on heavy, fuel-hungry destroyers for coastal submarine defense was burning through budgets. The Navy needed a dedicated sub-hunter strictly for local waters, leading to the birth of a 100 tons specialist. Project 1124 Albatross hit the water in 1970. It was a 10-hundreds-ton sub-hunting corvette. A combination of diesel and gas turbine engines pushed it to around 32 knots. It was built strictly for coastal defense. Engineers packed it with a large sonar dome, torpedoes, and heavy depth-charge rocket launchers. It sprinted on turbines to catch targets, then switched to quiet diesels to listen. A cheap, highly effective trap for enemy submarines. But a 10-hundreds-ton hull limits endurance. Its limited operational range restricted it primarily to coastal and near-sea zones. Also, its light anti-aircraft systems made it an easy target for aviation. Restricting sub-hunters to the coastline wasn't enough to secure Soviet waters. The command required a blue water hunter with a 40-hundreds-mile range. That demand birthed a 30-hundreds-ton frigate with a massive bite. Project 1135 Burevestnik entered service in 1970. It was a 3,200-ton frigate generating 56,000 horsepower. A combined gas turbine plant drove it to about 32 knots. The focal point of this ship was the heavy quad-tube missile launcher bolted to the bow. It fired rocket-delivered torpedoes over a 50-kilometer range. It became the primary ocean-going sub-hunter for decades, but it lacked one critical piece of modern naval hardware. The original Soviet Navy project 1135 lacked a hangar. Without aviation, it couldn't track fast nuclear submarines beyond the horizon. Operating blind beyond radar range was a massive tactical failure. Decades later, Russian engineers realized that a modern surface combatant must carry a helicopter and integrate stealth geometry, launching a new 2,200-ton project. Project 20380 entered service in 2007. It is a 2,200-ton multi-role corvette. 4 diesel engines generate 24,000 horsepower, pushing it to a top speed of 27 knots. Engineers finally fixed the blind spot. They packed a full helicopter hangar and a flight deck into a tight 104-meter hull. They also wrapped the superstructure in radar-absorbent fiberglass. Harder to detect. It hunts submarines while hiding from enemy sensors. But new sensors and missile systems, especially on later variants, contributed to delays and cost growth. The heavy price tag made it too expensive to mass-produce rapidly. The fleet needed numbers, not just expensive stealth. The command demanded a cheaper, stripped-down hull that could be built fast, but still carry heavy cruise missiles. That exact demand created an 800-ton compact killer. Project 22800 Karakurt was first commissioned in 2018. It is an 800-ton guided missile corvette. 3 diesel engines push it to a top speed of 30 knots. The trick was packing strategic strike capabilities into a tiny footprint. Engineers stuffed an 8-cell vertical launch system into a 67-meter hull. The hull was specifically designed to handle open sea operations, drastically improving seaworthiness over previous river-based models. It fires long-range caliber cruise missiles, strategic reach. It turns shallow coastal waters into heavy launch pads. But cramming heavy surface firepower left absolutely zero room for underwater protection. It completely lacks anti-submarine weaponry and advanced sonar. A quiet enemy submarine could sink it without ever being detected. Leaving small, lethal corvettes defenseless against submarines forced the fleet to rely on dedicated escorts. They needed a massive specialized blue water hunter built strictly to tear apart enemy subs at extreme ranges. Project 1155 frigate entered service in 1980. It was a 7,570-ton beast, generating 120,000 horsepower. 4 massive gas turbines drove it to 29 knots. The engineering focus was purely underwater. It carried an enormous bow sonar and 2 massive helicopter hangars. 8 heavy Rastra B anti-submarine missiles were bolted to the sides. 2 choppers. It hunted submarines relentlessly across entire oceans. But that extreme obsession with submarines left it highly restricted on the surface. It lacked a dedicated heavy, long-range anti-ship missile battery comparable to Slava. In a surface shootout, it could not deliver the same heavy anti-surface salvo as dedicated strike ships. Building massive destroyers that could not deliver the same heavy salvo crippled the naval budget. Modern strategy demanded the exact opposite. The fleet needed strategic surface strike power crammed into a cheap, shallow draft hull that could hide deep inside rivers. Project 21631, Buyan-M entered service in 2014. It is a 949-ton river-sea corvette. 4 diesel engines give it a top speed of 25 knots. The engineering trick is its 2.5-meter draft. It can sail deep into inland waterways, effectively hiding from ocean-based threats. Yet, it carries an 8-cell vertical launch system for heavy-caliber cruise missiles. Strategic range. It launches devastating strikes from inside the continent, but river optimization compromised its seaworthiness. Its open sea performance is limited compared with larger ocean-going combatants. Furthermore, its air defense is limited to short-range self-defense systems, making it a target for fighter jets. Hiding small missile boats in rivers couldn't project power globally. To directly challenge NATO carrier strike groups, the command had to rely on a brutal 11,000-ton relic designed purely for absolute destruction. Project 1164. Atlant, commissioned in 1982, it is an 11,490-ton guided missile cruiser. 4 massive gas turbines generate 120,000 horsepower, pushing it to 32 knots. The sheer brutalism of its design is undeniable. Engineers bolted 16 massive cruise missiles directly onto the exterior of the hull, originally P-500 Basalt, later P-1000 Vulcan. Those iconic angled tubes earned it the terrifying title of carrier killer, specifically designed to overwhelm enemy task forces. It was built with a single, aggressive purpose: completely overwhelm NATO carrier strike groups with a massive, synchronized missile salvo. But strapping 16 highly explosive missiles to the outside of the ship created a massive vulnerability. The sinking of Moskva in 2022 exposed how vulnerable an aging cruiser could be against modern anti-ship missiles and poor damage control. Naval warfare constantly shifts, but the pursuit of the ultimate strike vessel never really ends. Leave your verdict below.